Inside the power core warehouse, Mimic rushed inside the facility while disguised as Sonic. He saw the security camera pointed at him, thinking that Dr. Eggman was watching them. Decided to taunt it. Hey, hey, Eggy, Mimic said. Did you sneeze out the wire brush, or are you having a bad stash day? He was suddenly startled by a loud, fearsome roar, followed by a loud sound. Red, metallic dinosaur turned to look at the hedgehog impostor. Oh no, Mimic said, before he morphed back into his octopus form. I'm tagging out of this one. He then ran behind the platypus and began to shake in fear. During this time, Ruff and Tumble had discovered the dinosaur robot. This could smell like trouble, Ruff said. That's a big one, Tumble replied. They examined the giant dino carefully, thinking of a plan to help Dr. Starling, Eggette, and Mimic. They all looked at each other with smirks on their faces. Stink Bomber with a grand slam? Ruff asked. Works for me, Tumble responded. Eggette, who was by Dr. Starling's side, turned to look at the frightened octopus with the confusion onto her face. Mimic then turned to look at Eggette and said harshly, What are you looking at? Aren't you going to take care of the egg Rex? The little girl asked. Heck to the no, Mimic responded straight out. There's no way I'm dealing with that thing. Don't worry, Eggette said. I'll deal with it. She was about to walk over to the egg Rex, but Dr. Starling stopped her before pulling her back. No, don't do it, he demanded. I can't risk having my assistant get hurt. What's this for? Mimic asked. It must be to protect the warehouse from the charged air caused by the core malfunctioning, Dr. Starline explained. Out of the blue, the skunk brothers ran towards the egg Rex, leaving the three of their allies spellbound. Hey, bot! Ruff called. Open your mouth wide! The teal skunk rolled up into a ball and Place's brother picked him up. Your inside's about to get jumbled, Tumble said. Special delivery from Ruff and Tumble. They both said it together. Tumble then jumped high in the air and shouted, Grand Stink Bomber Slam! He then threw Ruff down into the Rex's mouth and clammed it shut. One by one, the screws popped out. Smoke began to spew out from the dinosaur's robot before it exploded into pieces. Tumble lifted the upper jaw from the dino's head and let his brother out of the mouth. Aw, man, he said. It ain't getting up after this one. Must have been something it ate, ha ha, Ruff scoffed. Walking out of the dinosaur, the smell was so horrendous that Eggette had to cover her nose. Dr. Starline and Mimic, on the other hand, were blown away by the stunt that the Skunk Brothers had performed. I'm honestly impressed, Dr. Starline said, clapping his hands. I hate to admit it, Mimic said. But so am I, the platypus began to walk, saying, No time for an encore. Load up as many crates with each of the core types as you can. However, Mimic noticed this was going the wrong way. What are you doing, Doctor? He asked. The goods are in this way. The octopus pointed backwards with his thumb. I'm going to do my job, Dr. Starling stated. And what's that? Mimic asked, crossing his arms. Dr. Starling turned his head slightly to look at Mimic and said, To ensure Dr. Eggman gets the story we want him to see. He deleted the footage of Dr. Starline's truck, entering the facility where the rest of the gang were loading up with crates containing each power core type. Afterwards, the platypus had discovered a secret door that revealed a room filled with robot parts and boxes, action figures on shelves, and he remembered this room. Ah, the egg cave, he said. Such good times. He walked towards the glass case with the grounder robot and a caterpillar robot inside. The doctor thought, Oh, time to go back to simpler time. It wasn't really that long ago. Dr. Starline picked up the figure that resembled Dr. Eggman and began to smile with nostalgia. Yet it feels like a lifetime, he said. Back when I was still enamored with the spectator, a naive admirer and a brilliant but flawed man. Then he turned his head and up to his left to see a mechanical version of himself as a figure. Before upon seeing it, his anger grew to the point where he smashed the Eggman figure on the floor before snatching the Starline one. But after all this time, Dr. Starline said, I was blinded by the doctor's superior facade. His frown had slowly formed into an evil grin and said, I will make him pay for my errors he made. He then chuckled lowly while under his breath, placed a figure on himself on the inside of his vest. Once he did so, he began to sing. His planta feels so remaining still, a front row seat uncomfortable frill, reflecting on everything he had craved. He twirled around the room, taking one more look at the figures and robots that were showcased. The sunrise never seemed so sweet, entered by the final ocean breeze, Dr. Starline said. As the world beneath him started to shake, he suddenly stopped his tracks when he saw a sword who happened to be shaped as a drill. He picked it up and began to examine it. Run, run, run for the hills. Leave behind your dollar bills. This value of paper means nothing now, and everything around you will crumble down. He began to swing it around, destroying everything in sight, from action figures to robot parts. Most of the action figures fell apart before hitting the ground. The Dr. Starline swung the sword to knock down boxes and topple shelves over. During that time, he sang, while fiddling with the shelf toward the end, they will be reflecting on everything of the life they spent until then. He then stopped, and then he dropped his sword to the ground. He was tired and he was so out of breath. The egg cave, however, was damaged beyond repair. The action figures were dismantled left and right, and the robots that were made up to display what was damaged. The shelves were knocked over and the boxes were smashed. Soon Dr. Starling composed himself and left the room as if nothing happened. He walked back to his truck, where he was greeted by Dr. Eggman's daughter. "Hi, Dr. Starline," she said. "We got all the crates we could find." "Wonderful, dear Eggett," Dr. Starline cheered, patting his little friend on the head. "Is everything all right, Dr. Starline?" Eggett asked, showing concern for her friend. She could tell that he was worn out because he was out of breath. "Oh, I'm all right," Dr. Starling said. "Just had a little bit of an exercise. Come on now, let's get moving." And with all that said, they ran up to the truck. Dr. Starling picked up Eggett and set her inside with the alley-oop. Before climbing himself inside, Mimic, who happened to be waiting for the two of them, stared at them impatiently. "What took you so long, Doctor?" he asked. "I apologize, dear Mimic," Dr. Starling responded, "but let's just say that I had a bit of a nostalgia kick." The octopus then looked at the platypus before saying, "Yeah, uh-huh." In order to trick Eggman into thinking it was Sonic who broke the power core factory, Rough and Tumble created a shape what looked like Sonic's spin dash, and what they did was Tumble took his brother, who curled up into a ball, and threw him into the main gate. It would have looked like the spin dash, but this course of action only left a medium-sized dent. "What the heck?" Rough said. "No worries, Rough," Tumble replied. "I'll just take care of this." He walked up to the dent his brother made and made a fist and counted to himself. 1. He gently placed his fist onto the dent, determined to make a bigger hole. 2. He then pulled his fist back and waited for a few seconds. 3. He swiftly punched at the dent, resulting in a circular hole that looked similarly to the blue hedgehog's spin dash. And the cream skunk waved his hand around in pain. "You okay, Tumble?" Rough asked. "Yeah, it was worth it," Tumble answered, reassuring his brother. When the deed was finally done, the skunk brothers hopped into the back of the truck and told the platypus that they were ready to go. The team left the premises as fast as they could before they could be seen. Upon arriving at the vicinity, everyone was exhausted, especially Eggett, who fell asleep on the way back from the power core factory. While everyone else had seemed to walk to guest rooms to call it a night, Dr. Starling carried a sleepy Eggett on the way to one of the guest rooms and placed her on the bed. He tucked her in gently, rubbed her hair, before leaving her to a silent slumber, and quietly closed the door so she would sleep peacefully. Dr. Starling began to walk in the room where he would vlog his progress of his work, or status unquo. He's saying, "They will turn the page in a frantic despair, while hoping that positive answers were there. They will call off the search and accept their fate, sit by the window and know to escape." When he entered the room, there were several crates containing the 4 colorful power cores. "Stay right there where you are, while the darkness waits for you at the door," the platypus sang. "The sirens will scream, and they will sit back and relax and enjoy the show." He then opened up the crate, picking up one of the power cores at a time. He examined every one of the cores: speed, flight, power, and magic. His thoughts began to race with the brand new creation in hopes that he could use all four of the power types to outmatch Team Sonic. The platypus began to sing as he twirled around with his four power cores in hand, while finding shelter for the end. They will be reflecting on everything, and I mean everything of life that they spent until then. A smoke and ash fall from the sky, so real that they hold on to anything, and I mean anything, hoping life won't pass them by. He then turned to see the green capsules, filled with identified beings inside. Dr. Starling took a look at them, before his thoughts turned back at the power cores. Non existing answers, he sang. Now we are condemned, my friends. This is the end. In no time at all, Dr. Starling began to work on his invention. First, he soldered with the golden base to hold the new thing in place, and then he took each power core and placed them on the base one by one, combining them into a black orb. Then he polished the orb in order to have it clean. At long at last, Dr. Starling said with glee, my invention is complete. The quadricore. The quadricore had been invented in means of replacing what's left of the war orb topaz. This will be perfect when taking out Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Lavinia all at once, he said. Then he decided to field this test with a brand new creation. As he did so, Dr. Starline began to sing once again, stay there right where you are, while the darkness waits for you outside your door. Within a few seconds of pressing the quad core, he began to glow blue and then dashed through the room at the speed of light while singing. While finding shelter at the end, they will be reflecting on everything. He pressed the orb again as he was surrounded in a yellow aurora. I mean everything in the life they spent until then, Dr. Starling said as he leapt across the room in long distances. While showing off his acrobatic skills, he began to glow red after pressing the quad core, indicating that he could lift several heavy crates as he sang. As smoke and ash fell from the sky, so real that they held up onto anything. The doctor then turned, and a fan light was hanging from the ceiling. As he was singing, he pressed on the orb for the fourth time, and is surrounded by the green aurora. I mean everything. Hoping that life won't pass them by, he took out his right hand and pointed at the fan, which was beginning to flick on and off until the light was completely burnt out. The platypus lowered his head and said, successful test. He then looked at his quad core, which at this point was dimming down slightly. With this, he declared, I could practically pretty much match the speed of Sonic, heights of Tails, the strength of Knuckles, and the mystical powers of Lavinia. Dr. Starline began to smile a wicked, sinister grin as he muttered under his breath, just you wait, Sonic Heroes. This will be the last battle of your life, and then you will all be defeated for good.